Pay close attention. The news you're about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrael Hawkins. Well, in the news today, Russia continues to lend its support to Syria. Also, the King of Jordan makes a plea for peace. And presidential candidate Donald Trump doesn't hold back his thoughts about the media. So we'll have these stories and more. But first, have you ever felt like you just had a cloud following you around? Well, thanks to a new study put out by Oregon University, we find that each person is surrounded by a germ cloud, so unique it's like a fingerprint. While our bodies are teeming with millions of bacteria, many are shed into the air continuously. In this study published by the journal Peer, it shows how the microbes we shed form our own personal germ cloud.
Wow, very interesting. Because our bodies give off different particles during movement, researchers found that microbes in unoccupied and occupied spaces are different. After putting 3 people in a room for 4 hours, they were able to identify each person based on their unique microbial signature. Although the types of germs emitted from people are more or less the same, the ratio of these germs differ per person. Makes sense.
Well, as amazing as microbial fingerprints are, our bodies don't just shed these microbes. In fact, we are made up of hundreds of trillions of these microorganisms. In fact, there are actually 10 times more microbial cells than the human eukaryote cells. Now let's take a look at this informative talk presented by Elaine Shao on the commensal microbiome, a group of microbes that live in the intestines and how they work with and help the brain to function. Take a look at this.
So it never ceases to amaze me that each of us carries around a 3-pound mass of cells in our heads that controls literally everything we do. Importantly, though, the brain doesn't act in isolation from the body, but rather it responds to the needs and experiences of each of our organ systems. Now, here's a staggering statistic that some of you may have heard before. Our bodies are comprised of 10 times more microbial cells than our own human eukaryotic cells. These microbes, which are primarily bacteria, but also viruses and protozoa, they're part of our normal flora, and they make up what's called the commensal microbiome. In the intestines, there are 100 trillion of these bugs, reflecting over 10,000 unique species and contributing 150 times more genes than our own human genomes. It's even estimated that collectively, these microbes would weigh 2 to 6 pounds, which is up to twice the weight of an average adult human brain. More and more, we're learning that these commensal microbes that make up us have co-evolved to play fundamental roles in normal brain development and function. So we can study the role of commensal microbes by raising mice as completely germ-free and recolonizing them with whichever microbes are of interest. And by these types of studies, we're learning that commensal microbes regulate several complex behaviors, like anxiety, learning and memory, appetite and satiety, among lots of other behaviors. So you can see now that by studying this microbe-brain interaction, we can learn really important lessons about how microbes can contribute or affect our brain health and disease. So you might be wondering, how in the world does a microbe that lives in your gut affect your brain? And there are many different mechanisms. One way is by activating the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve contacts the gut lining and extends all the way up to the brainstem itself. And this is a mechanism by which the bacterium called Lactobacillus rhamnosus affects depressive-like behavior in mice. So in a task that measures depression-related despair, mice that have been treated with this bug exhibit less depression-like symptoms. And this is not seen if the vagus nerve is severed. Another way by which microbes can affect the brain is by activation of the immune system. So about 80% of the body's immune cells reside in the gut, and immune abnormalities contribute to several neurological disorders. And this is one mechanism by which the bacterium Bacteroides fragilis prevents a mouse version of multiple sclerosis. So mice that have been treated with this bug are more resistant to the disease, as shown by the red line in this graph. And this depends on the activity of a special subset of immune cells called regulatory T cells that expresses the marker CD25. So if we block the activity of this immune cell, then the beneficial effects of the bugs are prevented. Another way by which bugs can affect the brain is by activating the gut endocrine system. So gut endocrine cells are primary producers of neuropeptides and neurotransmitters. Gut microbes themselves can also produce metabolites that could affect brain function. And this is one pathway that we think is involved in the microbe-based treatment that we in the Patterson and Mazmanian labs here at Caltech have used to treat autism-like symptoms in mice. So by treating mice with this bacterium, Bacteroides fragilis, we're able to correct core abnormalities, such as the communication deficit that's depicted here. That's a hallmark symptom or diagnostic symptom of autism. So here, mice that are autistic-like display less communication, as depicted by the blue bar, and treating them with the bug corrects this effect, as shown by the red bar. So I think that the implications of these discoveries is huge, because what if we could, without a single invasive procedure, treat disorders like autism, depression, and multiple sclerosis? Microbe-based therapeutics might offer a way to build a stable community structure that can impart long-lasting effects without the need for a continuous treatment. Also, since microbes are relatively easy to manipulate and even eliminate, they can be readily modified for better functioning, regulatory control, targeting, and even delivery. So as a take-home message, I want you to remember that not only are we made up of mainly microbial cells, but that some of these cells can be truly mind-altering, affecting our brain development, function, and even our behavior. And also, in light of several studies showing important roles of commensal microbes in a variety of biological processes, from nutrition and immunity to now brain and behavior, consider all the things that we do on a day-to-day basis to change or disrupt our microbiome, and how this might affect our health and predisposition to disease. Thank you.
Very interesting. Well, moving on from our previous stories, which concern the amazing way our human bodies bring life to us every day, there are still some who do not feel every life is worth keeping. At a recent congressional hearing, Planned Parenthood's president, Cecile Richards, spoke out against the recent videos released by anti-abortion opponents, making her organization look like they are strictly in the business of selling body parts.
She urged members of Congress to see her position, saying it is unacceptable that in the 21st century, women in America are routinely harassed for accessing a legal medical procedure. Doctors who provide abortion, as well as their families, often face harassment and threats of violence, she said.
She ended passionately by stating how the recent smear campaign, as she called it, has only increased these problems, and American values are not reflected by these acts against women and healthcare providers, hoping that the committee would condemn them and continue funding the group.
But Ms. Richards' cry for mercy fell upon deaf ears with the House of Oversight and Government Reform Committee. The chairman, Republican Jason Chaffetz, wasn't too concerned about the strong opposition the group had been facing as of recent months. His mind was set on exposing the lack of need for government funding to the organization. He stated directly to Ms. Richards, "What I don't want to tolerate, what I don't want to become numb to is wasting those taxpayer dollars."
Now, he continued, "This is an organization that doesn't need federal subsidy. Planned Parenthood is an organization with massive salaries. Ms. Richards makes nearly $600,000 a year. The person that runs the affiliate in North Dakota and South Dakota makes roughly $450,000 a year. And I could be here for a long time listing out some very exorbitant salaries," he said.
Well, besides very well-paid officials, Congressman Chaffetz pointed out the huge amount of travel expense to Planned Parenthood as well, saying this is also an organization that seems to have exorbitant travel expenses. In 2013, they spent more than $5 million in travel. First-class tickets, private, chartered aircraft. Now, roughly, they're spending, he said, $14,000 a day on travel. And that is a lot. That's money, he said, that isn't going to women's health care, which is what they say that they're always pushing. But he's pointing out the fact, saying, well, that money isn't going there.
Sure. Yeah, that's wow. Well, turning our attention to the Middle East now, in the aftermath of the Stampede near the holy city of Mecca, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani has ridiculed the Saudi government, saying they are responsible for the tragic event. Imprudence, incompetence, and inefficiency of the Saudi government, he stated, resulted in the deaths of Muslim pilgrims, including Iranians.
Speaking to reporters after returning home to Iran from New York, where he attended the UN General Assembly meeting, President Rouhani said that Riyadh must fulfill its legal and international duties towards foreign nationals and Hajj pilgrims.
He also criticized some Saudi media outlets for producing animations of the Delhi Stampede, calling the move an insult to Muslim states. The president cut short his New York trip to be able to attend a ceremony honoring the Iranian pilgrims who were killed in the tragedy.
Well, once again, Afghanistan is in the news, this time with allegations that are truly disturbing. Information has been brought forth that U.S. soldiers and Marines were being told and still are being told to ignore known sexual abuse by Afghan allies. The New York Times is reporting that commanders in the Afghan army have been sexually abusing young boys, sometimes even on American bases.
In light of the allegations, soldiers and Marines have faced discipline and even had their careers ruined for simply speaking up.
Well, turning over now to more issues in the Middle East, YPN's Larry McGee has been following Russia's involvement in Syria for us, and he now joins us with the latest. Larry, what's the story?
If not for the assistance and aid of Moscow, Syria would be in a much deeper crisis. These are the observations now coming from analysts, with Russian President Vladimir Putin vowing to continue to provide all necessary military and technical assistance and encouraging other nations to join and help. America has remained critical, however, questioning the increase of the Russian military in the region and pointing out that it has bypassed NATO restrictions in order to fly in weapons and supplies. Satellite images allegedly show the Syrian base in Latakia being expanded, which American officials allege is evidence of a Russian intention to establish an airbase there. In the end, U.S. officials say the Kremlin's real motives are unclear. Rather, it's to build an anti-ISIS coalition, or to merely send a message that the Russian bear is back. One wouldn't know there was such suspicion and contention between the two major powers to judge from appearances, however. Pictures this week of Presidents Obama and Putin toasting at a UN meeting. The meeting comes at the same time as the Pentagon announced the suspension of the U.S.'s $500 million program to arm and train Syrian rebels, which is now being labeled as a failure. It was put on hold after a group of fighters delivered their U.S.-supplied weapons to al-Qaeda, an embarrassing move which President Putin Putin was sure to mention in his UN address. America reports that Russia has established its largest base ever outside of the borders of the old Soviet Empire in the west of Syria. It is reported to house 28 fighters, 16 helicopters, and surveillance drones. Russia, Syria's ally, has expressed a willingness to contribute to the battle against ISIS, but American complaints are that Russia makes no distinction between ISIS and other anti-government groups, some of which are supported by America. The members of the EU are having difficulty deciding exactly which measure they should support, though they all seem to at least agree that something needs to be done to change the circumstances in Syria. The United Kingdom, for example, is pondering the idea of employing force, while Germany is said to be more in hopes of a diplomatic solution. Prime Minister David Cameron says that Syria needs a government that can look after its people, which means Assad needs to go and ISIS has to go, and some of that will on occasion require hard military force. While Germany's Foreign Minister Frank Steinmeier says it cannot be that important partners that we need play the military card and destroy the chance, possibly for the first time, of a negotiated solution to the Syrian conflict. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, it still seems like even after all this time, they have not found a peaceful solution. Well, presidential candidate Donald Trump is in the news again as he expresses his disapproval of what he says is fabricated lies that the news media presents as truth. In an interview with 60 Minutes, Scott Pelley, he said, "I don't like lies. Some of the media is among the worst people I've ever met. A pretty good percentage is really a terrible group of people who write lies. False stories, they know they're false stories, and frankly, I'm angry," he said.
Well, the King of Jordan recently spoke at a conference. He expressed how violence and conflict have become the norm in his region, particularly Iraq. He stated, "We must reverse this dangerous trend. We must restore confidence in peace." Now, this is the objective of the Arab Peace Initiative. It calls for the creation of a viable, sovereign Palestinian state which will allow for comprehensive peace, including full, normal relations and security guarantees between all Arab states and Israel.
He continued, "Delay and failure will have unimaginable consequences for all our countries. Success will have global benefits." Now, this call for international cooperation to stabilize the country, engage all communities in the political process, and rebuild a solid and unified, stable Iraq, he concluded.
An Israeli opposition party leader, Yair Lapid, is pointing fingers at Benjamin Netanyahu for the continuing conflict between the Israelis and Palestinians. He said, "The bottom line is Netanyahu doesn't provide us with security," even though he at one time lost almost half of his political power last March. Now, since then, he invested heavily in a strategic campaign to position himself as one who can replace Benjamin Netanyahu.
Right. At a foreign policy speech, Lapid slammed Netanyahu's failed policies, saying they are a threat to Israel's security, leading to international isolation. He said that Israel should separate itself from the Palestinians and make peace with the entire Arab world. He also endorsed the 2002 Saudi peace initiative and convened an international summit to jumpstart the process.
Lapid said for 13 years now, former Israel has neglected this initiative and failed to respond to it, and it's time for us to realize that this is a positive initiative to work with. Lapid believes this is all about leadership and is himself laying the foundation to replace Benjamin Netanyahu.
Well, British politician Charles Tanock spoke in a recent address before the European Parliament. In his address, he welcomed a call from a high representative to the UN Quartet to relaunch the peace process. And, of course, he believes that the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative, which we've been hearing so much about recently, should be used as a blueprint to start from, with a commitment to the two people, two nations approach.
Now, he continued, the focus should be on cooperation of the elimination of the ISIS menace, which is a common enemy to all the parties involved, and this must be a #1 priority. And Katani basically was stating that they needed to focus on eliminating the threat from ISIS that many Arab nations are facing before they can decide on which of the Israeli settlements will stay or go, along with the other processes or the contentious issues that they're facing.
Right. Well, the EU's High Representative, Federica Mogherini, stated that Saudi Arabia has a key role to play in the revival of the Arab Peace Initiative that could be an important element of the way forward to restart the process that at the moment is not in place. And the lack of process, she said, is dangerous in both Gaza and Jerusalem and the West Bank.
She continued, "We've discussed ways of cooperating with friends and partners in the region and the international scene, including the United States, the UN, Russia, and other key Arab countries to recreate the conditions for a Middle East peace process, a Palestinian state, and the right for Israel to live in peace and security."
She concluded, regarding the Syrian conflict, we also share a common interest to put an end to the long-lasting war in Syria with enormous humanitarian consequences, that all the people that have died, as well as the people who have been left with great famine as a result of these wars taking place. And also security consequences have arisen as well for that entire region. And when I say entire region, I say the Gulf region, but also the European region, because somehow we share one part of the world that today is the most dangerous one. Well, sexual abuse, false reports, and continual war is really all the hope this current generation has to look forward to, or so it seems. Well, a great cloud of calamity is surrounding mankind, and the future of mankind looks pretty bleak if he's left to his own devices. But Yisrael Hawkins of the House of Yahweh has revealed the prophecies of the Holy Scriptures that show mankind the one and only peace process that's guaranteed to work and benefit all mankind. No negotiations needed. The House of Yahweh has a wealth of information for anyone searching for truth, including the newly released Yisrael Says program, which is the best scriptural study tool available to mankind, and it's free and available from the House of Yahweh only. Contact the House of Yahweh for your free copies of the Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Oh, and for that comprehensive Yisrael Says study tool, here's how you can obtain it.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at The House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also check out our new website, www.ypnnews.com, and to email the House of Yahweh, send your emails to info@yahweh.com. And for any calls coming outside the United States, please call the number on your screen.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next, the man that has the answers to all your problems, Yisrael Hawkins. For all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.